What's going on, guys? It's Greg from East Coast Dyes, and today we have a really cool video for you. I'm going to be breaking down the history of the Lacrosse pocket. So you'd be surprised how many people we have in tours into the warehouse and they've never seen a wooden stick before, so I think it would be cool to give you guys the lineage of how the pocket started and got to where it is today. So the very first sticks were for a game called stickball, and they were much shorter. They had a round head with a little bits of spiderweb looking leather, and you would clamp the ball between them. So those were the very first sticks in the very early years of Native American play, and then they moved into hand bent and carved wood sticks with a traditional pocket, kind of like what you're used to seeing, with a gut wall. So they would bend the stick around, have the one woven wall, and then a traditional pocket using lace and leathers. So then in the 1970s, the first ever plastic head was introduced by STX, and this had that same leather stringing, only this time the heads were totally made out of plastic, totally closed, and resembled sort of closely what we have today.
The second period scoring binge by literally pulling his way through Cornell defenders. Cornell, stung to the quick, wastes no time getting back in the third.
So for a decade, that's how sticks went on, and then the early 1980s, mesh was introduced for the first time. So it looked a lot like what we have today, 10 diamonds across. It was the beginning of what we call now hard mesh. So around this time is when Gymalax stepped on the scene. They were the first ones to really popularize the hard mesh. They were putting in all kinds of kits. They started their website, and they were pretty much the go-to place for mesh stringing, spools, shooting strings, all that stuff.
Guys, it's Alex over at Gymalax, coming to you live. Got a little something new for you today. Not exactly sure what to call this, so I'm gonna go with the Bonanza.
Yo, dude, I think it's time.
Dude, time for what?
Time for what?
Oh, mesh out, dude? For sure, dude, let's do it.
Then in 2008, the Canadian Mark Mesh was introduced by Blue Collar Lacrosse. This was the first time that wax mesh had been introduced. So traditionally, the hard mesh had a hard coating, hence the name. So Mark Mesh was the first wax mesh back in 2008, and it gained some popularity, especially in the box game. And finally, in 2011, this is when I made the first video about what would eventually become East Coast Mesh. I just want to make this video to officially announce that we are selling the mesh on our website, www.eastcoastdyes.com. So this is what the original pieces looked like. They came hand packaged in these little bags with these stickers we stuck on it. It was my first ever mesh, and the wax mesh was a lot of fun, especially making it in the basement, making it in a bedroom, and selling it over our house. This was a really great time for our company. So in 2012, the wax mesh really started to take off. You had Throne of String enter with this throne mesh. You had a ton of other companies, people making homemade mesh, videos about how to make mesh out of crowns. The wax mesh was really taking off and going crazy. Then in 2014, String King was launched out of California, and their big selling pitch was not a wax coating, but a different fiber that made it waterproof. And they started to really gain popularity. It was kind of like an East Coast, West Coast battle between String King on the West Coast and ourselves with the East Coast Mesh out here in Maryland. Then in 2015, we launched our first ever non-wax mesh. That is Hero Mesh. It was manufactured in collaboration with Gymalax, who started the whole mesh thing off back in the 1980s. It was our first ever non-wax mesh. Then in 2016, the Warp first launched from Warrior. This was a really revolutionary and controversial product in that it was permanently attached to the pocket, to the head, and was also a new type of mesh manufacturing called flat knitting. And then going from 2017 to 2019, you've had new iterations of the older mesh. So String King has a bunch of new lines. We rolled out Hero 2, STX Warrior both rolled out all kinds of different lines of mesh. You also saw like the Phantom Pocket, Knot Mesh. There's been all kinds of stuff that has come out, but really it's come down to the two most popular companies, ourselves and String King, and also more warps have been coming. They've tried all kinds of different styles of pocket positions, different heads. So the last 2 years have been a whole lot of new pocket releases. And then that leads us to right now, where we're gonna be adding something new to this timeline of history coming next week. So stay tuned.